everyone. Welcome back. I'm just going to wait another minute for others to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to get started now. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Buell. I am the National River Cleanup Manager for American Rivers. I've been with American Rivers for, I think 3.5 years now. I'm located here in Washington, D.C., and my job is to help support this network of about 350 cleanup organizers. It is growing every day. This is our organizer discussion. If you've never joined before, we've started hosting several every year. We took a hiatus since I think June. And so we're back for another series. Today's topic, or every discussion has a certain topic. Today's topic is how can cleanup organizers play a bigger role in stopping litter at its source? And so we have a great presenter today, and this will be a really great discussion. I do want to let everyone know that this call is being recorded, and so for anyone that is not able to join or wants to refer back to it, the recording will be shared after this call. And so before I dive in, some updates and reminders. The 2021 photo contest is rapidly approaching. I can't believe it's already almost the end of November. I will share the submission dates with you guys after this call so you guys can start pulling photos and getting ready. The contest period is January 1st through mid to end of February. And so that includes submissions being reviewed, and then the public votes on their favorite photos, and there's different categories. So look out for that email very soon. Next is please submit your cleanup results. There are many of you that have had cleanups this year that we're still missing results for. So please submit those. I'll share the link to that form also. And finally, the next organizer discussion is scheduled for December 14th. I do not remember the topic off the top of my head, but I can assure you that it is a very exciting one. So now I'm going to hand it over to Milan Mehta, who is a sophomore at Georgetown University and an intern at American Rivers since June. To present our topic on how can cleanup organizers play a bigger role in stopping litter at its source.
Hi, everyone. I'm just gonna share screen now. You can see it. Okay. So what I was looking into is how we can use like people's behaviors of littering to kind of stop littering at its source. So using I guess behavioral science, just like a quick overview of litter, I guess, because you guys already know, but litter like has a big impact on rivers, like altering habitats, spraying toxic chemicals. It can harm wildlife and like threaten our drinking water and recreation. So what we do with NRC now is, I think it's kind of amazing how we have such a big network of all of you guys who help out like picking up litter and removing like millions of pounds of litter from river and riverside lands. So the idea is, what if we could stop litter at its source? So instead of just removing litter, what if we could stop people from littering in the first place? So to do that, we kind of have to understand the psychology of why people litter. And there's two like kind of overarching reasons. One is just kind of because of convenience. Basically, they're too far from the closest trash receptacle, or they have trouble identifying where the trash can is or what it is. Sometimes it's hard to find like spot in a park. And then also they just don't want to hold on to the piece of trash because it might be kind of just gross, or they just want to throw it away. Um, and the second big reason is just kind of a lack of awareness. So there's kind of a lack of a social norm against littering in lots of places kind of in the US. One study from a few years ago that kind of shocked me was that over 3 out of every 4 people had admitted to littering in the past 5 years, which was, I guess, more than I had kind of anticipated. So there's like an overall lack of social norm sometimes, especially with cigarettes, because people don't really know that cigarettes have plastic in them, and people like tend to think they're biodegradable and will litter them more often. Um, so those are kind of the big reasons why people litter. So how can we kind of change people's behaviors? There's kind of 3 overall ways. There's changing like policies on like a local or state level, changing waste management practices, and then just education and public outreach. And all of these are like 3 important ways that you can do it. You don't have to take all 3 routes, but each of them provide like a different way that can help tackle stopping litter at its source. So the first way is through kind of the biggest way is through changing policies. That can be through banning single-use items, taxing them, or putting like litter abatement fees on them. Um, and the first one with just bans, like plastic bag bans for grocery bags. An example is in California, where in like 2010, before the ban, about like 7.5% of all the litter items collected in like coastal cleanups was from plastic bags. And then after the ban, just 1.5% was. So there's definitely a clear drop in like plastic bag litter. But at the same time, in like a study in Chicago, they found that it didn't necessarily reduce the amount of reusable bags used. It just kind of increased the number of heavy duty plastic or like paper bags used. So in that sense, bans can sometimes work in reducing litter, but not always kind of reach the end goal of reducing plastic consumption in general. Um, Now taxes like were found to be more effective. Kind of like I mentioned in Chicago, how they tried to ban and it didn't work. They switched to a tax, and it had like a really good success in reducing just plastic bag consumption. And then in DC, they actually found out that a 5% bag tax kind of reduced plastic bag litter in the Anacostia and Potomac by over 50%. So it can be helpful there. And then a litter abatement fee is like a bag tax, but the money from that tax goes specifically towards kind of stopping litter. So that's kind of the way policy changes can work, but how can, like, as cleanup organizers, you guys get involved in that? The biggest thing is just advocate for like different policies with your local or state government. Um, Sorry. Then another way you can do that is just kind of spreading awareness about it with your cleanup volunteers. When you go out for cleanups, just talking about all of the potential ways that we can reduce litter and advocating for the government. And a third big way that kind of involves what we've been doing with American Rivers is using Literati and like cleanup data to support your efforts, is because Literati will like pinpoint where the litter was, and you can use that to kind of support as evidence, kind of to say we need more bans or taxes in this area, or policy needs to change. The big thing about like bans, fees, taxes, any of that is that they can definitely be controversial and sometimes not plausible depending on like where you are. So they might not always be kind of your preferred first avenue of action. So that kind of brings us to a second potential way, is just changing like local waste management practices. And the two like big ways to do that is increasing the number and like location of public waste receptacles, and then improving how like the ones that are currently there. So there are studies in like both Philadelphia and Hampton Roads, Virginia, that found that when you like put a trash can in a certain place called like transition points between buildings, um, and like in parks where there's traditionally more litter, putting the trash cans there and increasing the number of them will decrease litter, which makes sense, because the more that there's trash cans, the more easily people will be able to find a trash can and throw it away. And then a second big way that people can reduce public waste or like public littering is by making trash cans more visible. And because when they're not as visible to the public, people won't go out of their way to find them. So sometimes more brightly colored trash cans or just not hidden in a corner, all of these ways can kind of decrease the amount of littering and make it easier for people to, more convenient for people to find trash cans. And this is also true with like cigarette waste receptacles, like ashtrays and like that sort of thing, to put them outside of buildings specifically for when people come into buildings that can't have cigarettes or other pieces of trash. Putting that there will help reduce litter in those areas. So ways that you can like get involved as cleanup organizers, again, is kind of using Literati and specific cleanup results to support advocacy efforts. And I'll touch more on kind of ways you can advocate in like with local departments or like local government for different policies and waste management practices. And another big way that has a lot of potential is trying to sponsor public waste receptacles in like near waterways or in parks or litter vulnerable areas. So there's a lot of programs either by like state and local governments and even by Keep America Beautiful and other organizations that you can look into, and I can send more resources out. But they will sponsor, like they'll have funds and sponsor public waste receptacles that you can then put in your own local areas. The third way is through increasing just like education and public outreach. So it's kind of a more low-hanging fruit, but it can be really powerful in reducing people littering. Because often people don't litter like out of kind of malice, they just litter out of like a lack of awareness and convenience. So one study found by like University of South Florida and University of Nebraska that just putting up more signs talking about litter can reduce can cut litter in half in public parks. So just having signs and posters in your local communities is a great way to cut down on people littering. And it helps promote like a social norm against litter, because the more that an area is littered, the more likely that someone is to litter there. So the more like basically by cleaning up an area or having less trash in there in that area, people are less likely to want to litter and they'll seek out a trash can. So it just helps establish the social norm against littering, if that makes sense. And then how as cleanup organizers you can get involved is with social media campaigns online, like through blogs or any social media apps like Instagram or Facebook that your organization might have. And then also on the ground awareness campaigns just in your community, especially in parks or in areas where you've had cleanups, is to see what the like feasibility of this is, to put signs or posters out that kind of encourage people not to litter, or say like this area was cleaned up by your organization, and that will help kind of promote the social norm against littering. And then also just talking with your cleanup volunteers about this, and then trying to spread the word out. The more like of a grassroots effort you can have to increase awareness about littering, the more effective that you'll be able to have, like more better of effects you'll be able to have with your local community in reducing litter. Just touching more on advocacy efforts that you can have is to like change policies or increase waste management practices, like increase trash cans and stuff like that, is to make partnerships and coalitions with other organizations in your community. Because the bigger voice you have, the more likely you'll be able to influence your local officials. And you can do that either by contacting them through email or through, they often have comment sections on their websites. The best way to do this is to either contact them through the phone, or kind of be like a Google detective and find out their specific emails of specific people's names in departments or in City Hall. And by emailing them directly, you can often have like a better chance of having your voice heard. Another great way to do this is by attending town hall meetings and kind of voicing your concerns. You can either do this like through Zoom town hall meetings, which a lot of municipalities have now, or through in-person town hall meetings. So you can find out the specifics of that kind of in your local city council websites. And then the third thing is, again, just to raise awareness, either through like writing letters, like local op-eds in your local newspaper, or just, again, posting on social media and talking to people in your community. And I went a little fast, so I can go back again if people have any questions. But these are just some of the sources I had, and I'm happy to share them out if people need. If you want afterwards, I can send them to you. And I guess I can open up for discussion, or if people have any ideas that didn't come up in the presentation that they wanted to share. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Millen. So that was a very big overview of the different aspects to how you might approach addressing litter at its source. And so this kind of the start to some of these conversations that we'd like to have with the network in better assisting you guys with approaching this problem. Allie, you have a question you want to share?
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. I manage Colorado's largest cleanup. It's called Creek Week. We work for 9 days and engage thousands of volunteers. And I love this idea of preventing litter before it happens. We'd love to not have to do Creek Week, but unfortunately we do. My question is, back in the downturn of 2008, our Parks Department not only turned off a lot of our lights around town, but removed trash cans. So thinking about how to advocate for getting those trash cans back, some of the, I guess, pushback that we've heard when we're starting to talk to them about it is we have a fairly large unhoused community here. And the concern was that folks rummage through those or start them on fire. I mean, are there certain types of trash cans that are, tried and true, that can be a little bit more sturdy and not have, we also have wildlife here. Any thoughts on brands or types of trash cans that we can encourage our community to purchase?
I don't have any specific brands, but in like a study with Philadelphia, they found that having trash cans that have lids that you can kind of screw on, like kind of like how you see in parks now where you can't rummage through them. They have a top that's on tight, and you have to push through the flap to put trash in. Do you know what I'm talking about? So that is one way that they found that kind of decreased, one, people going through the trash, and two, the bins from overflowing too much. And then another important thing is potentially screwing down the base of the trash can into the ground, which will kind of reduce people or wildlife from messing around or getting into the trash cans, and then also from the trash cans potentially blowing over. That's as much as I found out, but I can look into it more, I guess. But
Thanks.
Yeah, Allie, that's another, especially with screwing them down and having the lids, that's a lot what I've heard as at least like part of the issue at some of these parks. I know that Catherine Servino, who is also a member of the network and is in Queens, New York, she had a very hard time trying to convince the Parks Department to just chain them down, like the bare minimum, so that because they were literally like falling over and the trash was spilling out. And so just those small steps, it might be very hard to get through, but they're definitely going to make a difference. Does anyone else have, I know Alex, you also had your hand raised, and feel free, anyone, to join in on the conversation if you have something you'd want to share or contribute to any of the other members who have spoken.
Hi, can I ask a question? This is Della. Let me just stop my video. So I'm here in Peoria, in Arizona, Northwest Phoenix. And I wondered if any of the participants have developed any guidelines or rules for businesses or residents who line the river. So things like you have to have a chain link fence so that the trash from your lot doesn't wash into the river or the wash. Do you offer them any kind of stewardship program where maybe they can help contribute to cleaning up their section, kind of like Adopt a Street or Adopt a Road? It'd be Adopt a River. And then does anybody know if their code actually does audits? Because I frequently see businesses with tons of trash overflowing because they don't want to order that extra pickup. So I'd be interested if anybody has any guidance on fences, riverside guidelines, or code compliance.
I think that's an excellent idea. I haven't heard much at all about that before, but I think that's an awesome area to explore. And we can also, I can put some feelers out into the network to see if anyone that's not participating today or others that might watch the recording at a later time might know some things. And all I can think about is, like, I know with HOAs, they have really strict guidelines, and I wonder if anyone's adapted that. There is in this network a neighborhood association, and I wonder if they've done similar things like that in their neighborhood for at least the residents, because I know that's also an issue where people, they leave trash, they don't close the lids to their trash bins, and then they fall over and they're right next to the river, and then the area floods, and then all the trash goes into the river, and then it spreads downstream. And so doing that from like a business standpoint, I think that would be, and a government standpoint, I think that would be very interesting. So has anyone identified? Michelle says she thinks that the National Park Service might have some guidelines for that. So that's somewhere to look at, and I can also look. That's a great idea. So has anyone, I know with American Rivers, we've been using Literati to, and Millen's mentioned this a bit about identifying like the hotspot areas on where litter has been collected. And the Cuyahoga, who I think is on the call today, Amy's on the call, their group, it has been doing cleanups all around Cleveland area and basically identifying hotspots to basically learn more information about where litter is kind of coming together, and also like what areas need trash cans, and basically having that data to support their efforts. So it's not just enough like people complaining, but that actually can be used as a tool to present to legislators and government officials that this is actually a big problem. We have the litter, we have the pictures, we have the data. And so that could help support your case. But I was wondering if anyone else has come across identifying where some of the litter in their community is coming from, and how did you figure it out in the first place if it wasn't for like using an app like Literati?
So if I can just say that we're in the middle of doing an audit. Mm-hmm. So we're using GIS to map a 17-mile stretch of the river. And I don't have data to share yet, but there's definite patterns emerging. So every time a channel feeds into the river, and those channels drain the streets. That's our biggest source. Anywhere where our transient population tend to live, ours is a wash, so it's not a perennial river. Wherever they live down there is another huge source. Every time we have a flyover, people toss their cans and their cigarettes out. So we see another increase in trash there. So those would be our three biggest incoming channels, overpasses and underpasses where people live. And then we have monsoons. So when the businesses along the channels aren't careful, when these big storms comes in, just everything comes into the wash. I have seen some of their landscapers take blowers on a weekly basis and just blow it into the river. So definitely education needs to get to the right people to know that that's what their people are doing.
And Della, I was just on a call before this discussing homeless encampments and kind of, I think from our end, we're looking at maybe some guidance, collecting some guidance from the organizers that have done a lot of cleanups around these communities. And basically, you don't want to be taking their homes and their actual like pieces that they own, these items, and you might not be sure if it's trash and it's actually litter or if it's actually like their home. And so and some of it also is it like education between and correspondence between that group of people or that individual that is living in that encampment, and having more of a conversation about I don't know, education, providing them trash bags. What have you found to really be working to help reduce litter in those areas?
So by law, we're not allowed to go into an active camp. You're not allowed to take it. You're not allowed to do anything. And that's fine. We don't want our volunteers going in there. So the rule is if we see anybody or if it looks fresh, we don't touch it. We generally are picking up after the river has flown and dispersed it. So we're really picking up stuff that's very muddy and has a layer of dust on it. And our only action right now is when we see an active campsite is we call our homeless service in the city and we direct them to go there. And then they will try and get those people into service, into one of the remedial type services to help them get out of homelessness. And so that will temporarily solve it. And then, you know, somebody else will move in. And so that's always going to be there. You know, the only way is by, you know, it's hidden because it's down in the river. So by showing our elected officials that, you know, we're hiding a problem down there. And yeah, you're not seeing people begging on the street, but they're down in the wash polluting. So the only hope is by highlighting how much we take out of these abandoned camps, that can change how much services or how much money they budget for those types of services.
That's very helpful. Great insight. Thank you for sharing. Has anyone, I guess, dealt with pushback from Park Service or legislators about putting additional trash cans out, or due to funding, which could be basically purchasing the actual trash cans themselves, or having people go in and remove the trash periodically? I know I experienced that in Tennessee, and that was a massive difficulty. And so basically they were saying, well, less trash cans is better. And then they just have a dumpster. So, but it was still a ton of trash. That was an issue. So wasn't sure if anyone else has dealt with that.
On our college campus, actually, we have we only have 4 trash cans in the main area of our campus. So we've had like a big kind of going back with administration to advocate for more trash cans, and kind of their big so far hesitation has just been the lack of someone, like the lack of people going out and actually removing the bags. And with us, it's different because it's like a college club campus, but we've kind of organized a system where hopefully students will then be responsible for taking the trash out. And I know that's probably not as applicable to like larger communities, but that's, I guess, one example that I had.
No, that's a great example, especially like you can do that. I mean, with the parks departments, they have many volunteers and state park systems, and that could be a volunteer program that you enact where like we don't have enough people to remove the trash, and so this will be your job, and that'll be a part of your contribution to the park system to help maintaining the trails and anything else that they might be doing. So I think that's a great idea. That's very applicable. Well, this is an open discussion, so feel free to share any issues that you're experiencing, and you never know, someone might have some insight and could provide some help with that. Michelle's asking, does anyone have experience with municipal-led volunteer coordination?
I'm it for the city of Peoria. I work for the city of Peoria. So I don't know what aspects Michelle is asking about.
Hi, I'm Michelle. One of the things, so we just conducted like a little bit of a snapshot litter study. I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and we just did a snapshot of litter for the city of Wichita, primarily on land, but as we all know, it ends up in the river eventually. And one of the things that was speaking with community members while doing this project, many of the individual volunteer coordinators who do cleanups around the city indicated that they would be very interested in working with the city if the city could be the like coordinating entity that can work at bringing these individuals together and their groups and those kinds of things. And so I was wondering if anybody has any experience with that and how, you know, like how either you approach the city or how the city thought to kind of establish that volunteer coordination.
So I can just speak from my experience so I'm part of Parks and Recreation, and so part of my job is to coordinate volunteers for our trails, our open spaces, and our rivers. So that already existed, that will to do that. And basically, in the beginning, it was actually trying to find people who would clean up. So I have the opposite problem. You already had the people. So doing a lot of networking to find people. But then once it started going, then the volunteers find each other, and you have no problem then finding people to clean up. We limit it to about 40 people per cleanup. We supply the city supplies the volunteer vests. We loan them. We provide the pickers. We provide the bags, and pre-COVID we provided gloves. I do bring gloves just in case people don't have them. I send out. We only clean once a month for 6 months because it's too hot, too many snakes the rest of the year in Arizona. And so it's managing the sign-ups and making sure people know where to go, where to be. And so people feel, closed in an organization, an organized effort, really. And then I'm there on the day, I'm cleaning with them, and then I take all the trash away. So that's kind of the role in Peoria. It's maybe not the same everywhere, I don't know.
That's great, thank you.
Allie, you have something to share?
Sure, if I can hit all my right buttons. Yeah, so the cleanups that we do, we facilitate 2 major cleanups a year, one in the springtime and then one in the fall. The spring is just a 1-dayer because 2 9-day cleanups would kill me. But we do work across our whole watershed, which includes 10 municipalities. And so one of the ways we tried to get buy-in is litter management is a directly supporting stormwater work. So all the municipalities have a requirement to manage their stormwater, and part of that is the water quality aspect. So this is one way that they can very easily check that box and say, hey, this, we get data out of it every year, how many people participate, how many bags were filled, how many extra pounds of things that can't fit into bags like trash or like shopping carts. And then they can then submit that with their required paperwork. So that's one of the ways we, tried to bring in all these different cities to say, hey, this is supporting the work that you're required to do. And then we have a steering committee for both of those events that helps with all the behind the scenes management. We work with, we have one local trash provider who's very supportive of this project because they're in the trash management business. So they help with our, they might leave dumpsters in strategic places or help have their staff drive the trails afterwards and pick up the trash piles. So we've learned a lot over the years. These meetings that Madeline puts on are very helpful, and just hearing what other people are doing too. So hopefully that helps. I'm happy to answer any other questions too.
I can also share my experience. It wasn't with for a cleanup, but I did, when I lived in Nashville, I worked at a nonprofit, and the state was some of the wastewater data that they receive to go to review to make sure that each of the facilities are in compliance was basically being sent to them by PDF, and they needed everything digitized. And so, we kept running into this problem where all this data was missing. And it was because it was all in this paperwork. And so it wasn't being moved over. And so as a nonprofit, we were like, okay, if you guys can provide the computers and the time and space, we'll bring the volunteers, we'll coordinate them. And we got a whole kind of system rolling and had 6 volunteers go I think 2 or 3 times over the course of a month and a half. And so it's really like Del was saying, getting that process started. And so you can having the municipality provide really the materials and showing up with the trash bags and maybe even removing the trash at the end of the day. And you start and bringing the volunteers. Once you kind of get that system going, then eventually the park system or that municipality might be more interested in taking that program over. So hopefully it's not a long-term thing that you would be managing, but hopefully you'll be able to get it started enough that they can take over eventually. Well, we have 20 minutes left. So is there any, I would like to keep kind of this conversation going through maybe having another organizer discussion that's focused on this topic and maybe going more in depth on some things that you guys are really interested in learning more about for addressing litter at its source. And so I would love to hear from you guys on really maybe based on what Millen has shared or what anyone else has shared during today's call, or some issues that you really need more information on to help slowly get towards addressing this, addressing the problem at the source. So does anyone have anything they want to share that they think, great, Annette?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in the challenge of, people experiencing homelessness as well. We have a lot of underpasses that people call home. And we have a relationship with the group in Chicago that relates to them, directly. And so I'm looking to kind of build that relationship in a thoughtful and respectful way. And so I would love to hear if there are success stories about how people have reached out to that population. I'm very much interested in Do we need to provide bags? We are partners with Waste Management. So is that something we could request of our partnership to say, hey, can you provide, additional receptacles and picking them up, monthly? Because, the people experiencing homelessness are living they're being given, to-go containers and disposable items at a much higher rate than other people. And I think there's definitely just a lack of bags, but also, support for them, because they don't have trash cans necessarily. So, I'd like to, before I approach our group, I'd like to, if there are, examples that I can bring to the table originally, I don't want to approach them and be like, how do I fix this without any suggestions? So to have a variety of options just seems like a good way to start the conversation, at least.
I saw several hands raised. Steve?
Yeah, hey, I'm Steve from National Cleanup Day, and I do have on the municipalities idea or concept that was talking about a little bit ago, that there's a city in Texas, being Amarillo, that started a program for a citywide cleanup. They began as a small nonprofit of one person just basically saying, I want to do something about this. He went up to the mayor of the city and the Parks and Rec department and a couple other people, got enough together so that everybody said, okay, let's try it out in one neighborhood. So that went from one neighborhood in 2017 to the entire city of about 100,000 people based upon the work of one person. And then the other thing on that is that they did, and this is something that they've tried out and has been very successful, is that they did a cleanup with a base from every elementary school in the city. And elementary schools tend to be in a neighborhood, small area, relatively speaking, and people could pick up supplies and things from there. So it started out small and easy. That's the best way to go, but it expanded through the entire city.
Great, thank you for sharing, Steve.
You're welcome.
I see a bunch of messages in the chat box. Yes, we will share Millen's research slides in our email after this. Allie said that they do always give bags out to the unhoused whenever they want them. And Amy shared that they do a litter pledge, stow it, don't throw it. And they give litter bags for their car or boat to encourage them to keep litter with them and throw it. And that they are mostly like trying to prevent people from throwing out trash out of their windows along the highways. And they've done billboards, ads, and borough and anti-litter campaigns. I know that gets kind of pricey. There are, I don't know if it's everywhere, but there are programs that do some free advertising. I know in Nashville, they had a billboard that nonprofits every nonprofit got like a week worth of it, like 1 week of every month, or maybe it was quarterly. And so that's like thousands of dollars in in-kind support, basically, that you would, for free advertising, to market whatever program or message you want to get out there. And so there's all these like things out there that I do want to keep like sharing, because I don't know if everyone has explored that that concept, and it might be happening in your city and you don't even know it. Steve?
Oh no, I think I just left my hand up, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
I had one other, I guess, question or comment. Just wondering if anyone uses TerraCycle. They're a company out of New Jersey, and they sort of recycle difficult to recycle things. So I was just wondering if anyone has experience with that. We tried it this past year. We work closely with our breweries because we love beer in Colorado. And we have 8 different breweries that we installed these cigarette butt recycling receptacles. And they've been very successful. For one, they're not very easy to tamper with. They are, locked to some sort of either the building or the concrete pad. And then they can actually empty those out, mail them in, and TerraCycle apparently turns them into things like park benches. So I was just curious, since we have success with that, recycling that piece, if anyone else has other experience with that company.
I know that they're limited to certain areas. Is that right? Is that correct, Hallie? So I think I looked at them probably like maybe a year and a half ago, and I think they're just not nationwide, and there were some limitations that went with it. So
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
They are a global company. They actually have operations in like 30 countries, if I remember correctly. We've talked to them a number of times. We haven't found, because we only work with nonprofits from the National Cleanup Day side. We don't have a natural fit for it because we don't compete with the nonprofits.
Yeah.
We have another kind of related to that. Has anyone else with their water reclamation districts, which are intaking water and sifting litter out of them, have any of you partnered with them to like get data from them directly, since they're huge and they're cleaning litter out on a regular basis?
I don't know if they collect that data. That would be probably my first question is, are they actually collecting that information? They might just be cleaning it up, but they might not actually be like tracking.
Right. I don't know if anyone is, and that seems like an area where, we're working with Northwestern, and undergrads are doing various assignments on data collection on litter. But that could be an area where, you're actually getting it out of the water, because we are doing a lot of land data collection. And I know there's going to be some difference, as in like more personal products and that kind of thing in the actual water itself. But I just didn't know if anyone else was doing that.
It's a great question. Okay. Oh, Dallas?
There's a trash. Oh, sorry.
No, Michelle, you can go.
There is a study being done in St. Louis using trash traps in the river. So it's not from the water reclamation department. It's just a nonprofit. And they have 3 different types of traps in tributaries at the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi. And so they're pulling out and categorizing that data to see what's flowing in the river. So for that exact thing, it's really hard to get stuff pulled out of the river and quantify it. So that's one of the things that actually I'm helping with that project. That's how I know about it. But that should be, it's still going on, and that should be something interesting that might be helpful for conversations in the future about how we can actually see what's going down the river, to make those connections with people to water bottles don't start out in the river. So just wanted to throw that out there so you can know that there are some pilot projects that are trying to capture the litter in the rivers.
Yeah, we were looking at doing that with sea bins, which we're finding a more complicated version of a trash trap because they require electricity and being taken in and out and blah blah blah. So I'm really trying to advocate for some trash trap kind of things here in Chicago. So if anyone has other research on different kinds of engineering or different ones that work, there's those like the pantyhose version that goes directly over the outfall. There's the sort of pool noodle angled to one area version. So it would be interesting to see like if some have worked in some areas better than others, because the sea bins I mean, it's a cool idea, but I think they really are meant for more of a dock situation and not as much of a river situation. We're kind of learning that the hard way, and they're way more expensive and a lot harder to install. So I'll look into that. Thanks, Michelle, for that St. Louis trash traps, because I'm in Chicago, so it's cool to have something sort of regionally that we can say, hey, they're grabbing our trash all the way down there, you know. And I think if we were to have something that was very like a Chicago business, you know, very clearly like Chicago's hot dogs or whatever, and it ended up in St. Louis, we could say, you know, we literally are sending our trash down to St. Louis and we need to grab it ahead of time. So I'm really interested in that idea.
Did you
So
say
check out-
literally?
Literally. So check out Osprey. I tried to pull up the website, but it's kind of down for right now. So Osprey has the litter getter, which is just basically a tube that kind of goes across the river and anchors on the bank. And it has a little, like a little barrier that kind of goes underneath to catch the floating trash. Then there's the Asheville Greenworks trash trout, which has a cage on the top. It is not great for heavy flow areas, we have discovered. And then one of the organizations that we're working with there in St. Louis actually built his own called a Beaver to Beaver. And so those are the three that we're using. And they actually just moved them to different locations. So they kept the same locations, but moved the different traps because some of the traps were just getting knocked off every time there was a rainstorm. So there's pros and cons, but if you check out those, that might be helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, part of our issue is that, you know, most of the Chicago River system is navigable. So putting something all the way across the river isn't really an option for us. I think we could do it coming out of creeks, right? Or, you know, tributaries would be an option. But, you know, something across the entire, you know, river isn't really an option in most places. So, but thanks for those resources. I'm really excited to see them.
Yeah,
And
these are just in small tributaries and creeks off of the Mississippi and Missouri. Yeah, trying to put something across the entire Missouri River is not feasible, but in those tributaries, yeah, definitely.
Do you think there's like, you know how river patterns, you can see kind of the flow and the eddies and things like that? Like, I feel like there could be some science applied to the way that water moves through the system. So how, you know, where the hot spots would collect, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm hoping to try to maybe possibly do with this project is to be able to kind of map using other maps that people have created to map the flow of water and looking at, because one of the things that we're using with looking at the data that comes out of the river is how degraded the things are. So you can kind of get an idea of maybe possibly how long it might have been in the river, and then maybe possibly how far it's traveled down the river. I mean, this is just, you know, top of the, you know, just kind of initial analyses that can maybe push further, but then maybe we can kind of do that mapping, like this bottle is so degraded, it's got moss growing on it, so it's probably been in the river for this long. Those kinds of things to really get that visualization of like this probably came out of North St. Louis and we found it in a tributary all the way down south, you know, but it's still perfectly intact, or, you know, those kinds of questions.
Yeah, for sure.
This seems like an excellent trash traps discussion topic for a future organizer discussion. Thank you guys for sharing that. It seems that I guess from my interpretation of the conversations, does it seem like where everyone's feeling is basically we need to have some data and information and identifying like the litter itself before you can kind of get to identifying where the source is, basically collecting that data information? Is that where people are feeling a gap?
I'm a little torn on continuing to collect data. I mean, we will, and we are continuing to do it, but I think, you know, in the last 2-3 years, it's been consistently half of it is plastic, half of it is food, and if you categorize it another way, half of it is food waste. So at this point, like, think that we could work our whole lifetime on reducing single-use plastic. You know what I mean? So there's obviously value in having the data, especially local data, but I feel like, you know, it's consistently plastic, right? And plastic and plastic. So, you know, I think part of me I really like the idea that I think it was Steve said about like the citywide cleanup, because, you know, Madeline, I run like the Chicago River cleanup. But I'd love for the city, and at first I was just trying to think about, could the streets and sanitation sweep the streets that enter directly into the river, at least as part of Chicago River Day? Like, we're literally cleaning up so much, like, on behalf of our city. Like, how is the city participating? But we do have one little island called Goose Island in the middle of the Chicago River. So I would like to try to, as you said, like maybe start with making Goose Island litter free and then expand that, you know, throughout the city. So that's something we're going to try. It's our 30th anniversary this year. So I am trying to think of like new ways to approach that. And, you know, that being said, the only good thing is that the first location we had for Chicago River Day was a forest preserve, and, you know, they were pulling shopping carts and cars and stuff out of there. And that really isn't the location anymore in Chicago River Day because it is generally clean. So it just took 30 years, but it can, you know, it can, if you over time continue to pick up, it becomes a place without litter. Again, like to Milan's point, that people will then not litter there in the future.
Della, you have your hand raised. I think you're outside.
I was wondering if anybody had any research on styrofoam and getting companies to stop packaging items like refrigerators or household appliances in styrofoam. We do take a lot of styrofoam out of our river, and of course it degrades so quickly and just breaks into a million parts. Same goes for, has anybody any success with putting pressure on the businesses near the river to stop using those cups, those styrofoam-like cups? Be interested if there's been any research around that.
We're doing outreach with restaurants right now to help them, you know, understand what kind of single plastics do to the environment and the costs associated with them generally. So we, you know, just like I think we've talked about before in this call, we're trying to have these restaurants have plasticware be opt-in instead of opt-out. And then we're kind of creating a list of, you know, there's a lot of green business certificates and litter is a part of them. So if you encourage your restaurants to be generally green in other practices, litter can be a component of that. But yeah, styrofoam is super frustrating. And I think a lot of companies generally, now that they're understanding corporate social responsibility and sustainability in general, waste reduction is a part of that strategy overall for the company. So I know, like, forget which company I was reading about, but like there's a lot of people that are reducing their packaging because they know it saves them money. So if you take the strategy of, hey, if you find a different way to package this, it actually will save you money in the long run. With businesses especially, that can be, you know, a really powerful message. Or finding an example of a nearby business that has changed practices, to give them, to be like, see, it's totally possible. This guy's doing it and he saved this much money. They'll be like, okay, then fine, I'll try it. So that would be, you know, my first recommendation.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is styrofoam is so cheap. You know, it's just, that's like, so the cost isn't really as much of a factor at that point. and
Yeah.
the other. But I definitely agree. I think that packaging is going to be changing. It's probably going to be a long-term thing. Next 30, 50 years, it's going to look very different. But it's not going to change it. And styrofoam is that's the worst. And I just want to rant right now. The little like tiny pieces, the ones that like come in like all the little like circular like pieces, and they all break apart. Like even when you go and reach for a handful and it just breaks in your hand. Sorry, it just really bugs me. Well, we're out of time. Thank you everyone for joining today's call. We're definitely hoping to continue the conversation. So I hope to see you guys December 14th, and have a great Thanksgiving. And I'll share the recording and the research sources at the end of this call. So have a great week, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks, Madeline.
Madeline. Another great call. Nice seeing you all.
Will we need to register for the next one, or will you send?
I'll send it out. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. This was great.
Great. Thanks. Bye.
Thanksgiving. Thank you.